Okay, this is another flying story. It was I hadn't flown for about 14 years, and my son Michael had a teacher in school called Mr. Howroyd. That's right, and he was a keen flyer. He had two planes, and in fact he had his own little airfield up on the Saanich Peninsula. And so seeing that we were kind of interested, he invited us out to visit him at his airfield, and he took Michael up in his Pete and Paul, which is a canvas, biplane with open cockpit, and we were quite excited by the whole flying thing. And at the time also we were flying gliders, radio-controlled gliders, these ones. That was quite a lot of fun. So anyway, I heard that down in Arlington, just north of Seattle, there is an Experimental Aircraft Association gathering every year, a bit like Oshkosh. And the Experimental Aircraft Association has this thing there, and so I thought, that would be quite close. That would be really cool to go to. So I went up to the Victoria Flying Club and said, listen, I haven't flown for 14 years, but I'm really interested in, renting a plane and flying it down to Arlington for the air show. And the guy said, well, okay, let's go up and fly around. So we went up for 2 hours and flew around. And at the end of the 2 hours we landed, and he said, I'd rent you a plane. So I said, oh, okay, well, I'm not quite ready myself yet. I'd like to get a little more practice in and do some night flying and things. I'd had a night flying endorsement. So for the next few days, I spent a few hours flying around up to sort of Duncan and back and around Victoria, and then I did some night flying. So on the night flying day, we go up, and I had been practicing on Microsoft Flight Simulator on my computer, so I was a bit too much into the instruments for visible flight rules, and we were doing a circuit of the airport at night, and the instructor noticed that I had my head in the instruments a bit, and he suddenly just turned off all the lights on the instruments and said, okay, land, take off, do another circuit. So I said, oh, okay. So that means you got to now do it by looking out the window with reference to what you're seeing. It's just lights on the ground because it's dark, but you can see lights and orient yourself by them. So anyway, I did a successful circuit, and it was all okay. So on the duly appointed day of the air show, my friend Nigel in Vancouver and his son Louis had decided they wanted to come too. And Nigel's dad had been a Battle of Britain pilot, and they were very much into flying too. So we flew over to Boundary Bay and landed there and picked up Nigel, and he said he'd been telling people that he was going down to Arlington, and he'd told one professional pilot that from Air Canada, I think he was, and he said, oh, I wouldn't fly into Arlington if you paid me. So I thought vaguely, well, what's that all about, So anyway, we pushed on, and we went down, landed at Bellingham to go through customs. So there was some kind of emergency in Bellingham. Somebody had had a spark plug wire fall off a homemade aircraft and was landing, so we had to kind of hold off on our landing and then come in with full flaps, and it was all very exciting. But we went through customs, and that was all quite successful. And then we flew down to Arlington. Well, as we approach Arlington, we get on the radio, and the guy on the radio says, don't call me, just listen to this channel and do what I say. Join the circuit over this little town nearby. And so I said, okay. So as we approach this little town where we are to join the circuit for Arlington, I dropped down to 1,000 feet, which is circuit height. And as we came down to 1,000 feet, the sky was full of planes. It was just everywhere you looked, there were planes. And they were all trying to slowly get into a long line so that they can land one at a time, but they're still pretty close together. And anyway, the circuit, we did about 8 miles before everybody was, in a line and coming in on the final into Arlington. And even then, we were landing probably every 10 seconds. The planes were coming in. And the guy on the radio he's going, okay, Quickie 2, land on the runway. And that yellow Cessna, land on the right side of the runway on the grass. And then and he's directing us. We're landing on both sides of the runway and on the runway, just one after the other, just coming in like that. Talk about an adrenaline rush. It's coming in there, white knuckles, and holy man, they're just planes just coming down on the ground like that. It was absolutely amazing. Anyway, we come into the air show, which was pretty impressive. I mean, so many beautiful handmade planes and quickies and varies and longies and restored classics, and it was absolutely amazing. And they had quite a good air show. And the thing I remember about the air show, actually, there were two demos. One was a pilot. He was well into his 70s. He had started flying when he was 13 with the likes of Chuck Yeager and other early people in the EAA, and he flew this pit special along the runway about maybe 100 feet off the ground, doing spiral loops. He was just spiraling down the runway like this. When he got in front of the crowd, he just hung it on the motor and went across like this, and then he spiraled the other direction down for the rest of the runway. Absolutely the most unbelievable piece of flying you've ever seen. It was quite an amazing air show, and Julie flew home, and there were no more major events.